Hello, everyone, and finally, welcome back to another art history lecture. I'm going to have to apologize because I have not kept up with my promises in my past videos for the summer, and I've been pretty slow with uploads. But I've just been super packed this summer, and I had no idea my summer was going to be this busy. I believe in my most recent upload, I was kind of talking in the beginning about an art community exhibit that I was working with a group of people, and it actually happened. It happened and it went so successfully. And the turnout was amazing. So many people came up, and I honestly do not think it could have gone better. It was amazing. And I felt now that my summer is kind of coming to a neat little conclusion. I can 100% say that I'm very satisfied with how I devoted my summer and my time and myself into this project that I feel like such a big part of myself went into. There have also been a lot of changes, as you can see. I got back from Korea and I cut my hair. Korea was amazing. I got to see some relatives that I haven't seen in a really long time. It was a nice respite, kind of coming back from Koreatown in Los Angeles, so that was kind of funny and ironic. Yeah, I kind of just needed a change, and it was just getting so humid and hot in Seoul this summer, so I was just like, 3 hours before my flight, why not just cut my hair? So I'm pretty surprised because usually every time I cut my hair in the past, I've always really severely regret it. But I'm happy to say I'm pretty satisfied with how it has turned out. So cheers. Today I will be talking about an artist kind of from a group of artists, or like more specifically from an era, from a certain subsect that I really was interested in for a little bit because I just found it really highly intriguing, especially due to my major being political economy, since this kind of section or this kind of sector of art is very politically charged, and I was a little bit unsure about how I should go about framing and kind of phrasing things in this video, but I worked really hard the past couple of days delving into personal research, so I really hope you enjoy this one because I found this one really enjoyable to research. Another thing that interested me specifically about this artist was kind of, not so much anymore, he is still alive. I feel like in all of my other past videos, they've all been artists that have passed away. So honestly, he's still alive, so he might see this video one day, so I don't know. But in his older works, more so in the 60s and 70s, when this kind of era was going on, he delved a lot into language and this expressive nature of language and how he chose to interpret it and address it in terms of the very raging climatic political environment that was happening around him at the time. And language is something that is so very interesting to me. Another little summer project I was going to work on this summer was kind of writing at least a 10-page personal memoir, very heavily influenced by Teresa Hakyoung-cha, her book Exilé Temps Mort by Teresa Hakyoung-cha, and she's actually she was a Korean American artist who attended Berkeley and studied French and comparative literature and art. And she wrote her books kind of as this weaving translation between her experiences as a Korean American immigrant through all three of the languages she knew, such as French, English, and Korean. And it's really beautiful. The majority of it is a poetry piece. It's like a contemporary writing piece, but I really enjoyed it, and I kind of wanted to base my narrative and my piece of writing off of her kind of as like this memoir to her mutilated timeline, because unfortunately she did pass away in a really traumatic event. Yeah, I don't know, this concept of translating language and kind of finding like the hidden in-betweens or gray areas between language that specific words or translations are not able to convey are really inspiring and super interesting to me. So today I am going to introduce the artist that I will be speaking about today, Wu Shanzhuan. Wu Shanzhuan is considered one of the most prominent figures of the 1980s in China due to the conceptual art movement that was happening in that country at the time. And he's actually very well known to be one of the first artists in China to incorporate textual pop references. His art is very conceptual in nature and often deals with issues surrounding language, as I mentioned before, which highly intrigues me. And he's really well known for kind of his experimental works with language and this use of big character posters, which I'm about to get into in a little bit. Wu Shanzhuan was born in 1960 in this very remote fishing village that was called Zushan, and he graduated from the Zhejiang Academy of Fine Arts in Hangzhou in 1986, and later he kind of moved on into Germany for the later part of his life, where actually I believe he is residing now. And he actually stayed there to study again and gained a master's degree from the University of Fine Arts of Hamburg in 1995. Like I said before, he's kind of like this pioneer of the 1980s Chinese conceptual art movement, and he uses a lot of very heavy textual references derived from Chinese characters in his work. So I'm going to be giving a little bit of more of a historical and political background as to why his work is so charged and holds so much meaning for the history of Chinese calligraphy. So pictorial posters have been made in China since the 1920s to kind of promote the ideology and policies of the communist parties that were happening at the time, particularly to foster this sort of revolutionary culture within their society. Visual propaganda was a very, very important mean of educating and kind of indoctrinating the populace at the time. And it was these kind of big visual pictorial posters were kind of how they demonstrated the attitudes and behaviors that the party desired of the masses. However, after the People's Republic of China, the PRC, was founded in 1949, this mode, called in English translation the socialist realism, kind of became the dominant style of propaganda art for the party. It's kind of a very hyper-realistic style, as I will show in images, and it was kind of taught in China's art academies starting in the 1950s. It appealed a lot to the majority of popular tastes in art at the time, and its messages were very easy and broad to grasp for the general audience, no matter what status or level of education you had. This in turn made the abstract ideology very concrete and very comprehensible through model figures who were portrayed very vividly to the viewers through the posters. Posters made during this kind of cultural art revolution in the time are known to be very bold and very forceful and always hold kind of like these larger than life visual figures that display heroic gestures and facial expressions. These kind of pictorial posters played a very crucial role in communicating the very frequent changes of official policy and the policy interpretations by the party. And in this era, Chairman Mao is seen in a lot of these, kind of portrayed as, like I said, larger than life and almost looming over his devoted followers. The majority of the posters kind of followed this line of like this great revolution that touches people to their very souls. And the language that was used was always very deeply rooted in the element of that of Chinese culture and kind of infringed upon this visual power that the Chinese character actually holds. This in turn, kind of in the 1980s, led to a lot of avant-garde artists such as Wu Shanzhuan to kind of revisit this in this sort of ideology of written power. As Shanzhuan said, the Chinese character is the most significant element in terms of being able to shape and influence people's thinking on the broader sense of national psychology. So in the 80s, Wu kind of emerges and kind of begins to play with like the visual language of the Cultural Revolution. And he kind of chose to direct his art in this way of co-opting and tweaking these huge red, white, and black graphical styles that were very popular in the posters. While the main goal of these posters, like I said, was to kind of infiltrate full maximum understanding, like this very clerical, resonant, similar understanding among everyone, Wu kind of undermines this and kind of turns it more into this polar opposite thing, like this kind of contextual and very broad interpretation kind of thing. Wu Shanzhuan has never really referenced his pieces ever as his own art and kind of actually references them as, quote, Wu's things. He never tires of quoting from Sartre when he describes his works, such as a really famous one from Sartre, which is, "People are a bundle of useless passion." And I guess he kind of directed his art in these big character posters because he discovered that his use for his useless passion was to find useless truths. One of the more famous pieces he has done in this era is this set called Character Image of Black Character Font. And 4 of the 6 piece image set are actually legible, and combined they, in translation, they say, "Yes, this crowd yet," while the other 2 pieces in this set are effaced or torn and illegible to read. But even like this pictorial style of legible characters kind of defy interpretation because they don't make sense when you put them together. By erasing the 2 other effaced images, Wu kind of removes this possibility of reading meaning into them. And works such as these kind of made Wu the pioneer of the 80s conceptual art movement. And another piece by Wu Shanzhuan, this one is called the Red Humor series. This is probably his most infamous piece that he's most well known for in his language-based art era. Like his past artworks, this installation mimics the style of the Cultural Revolution pictorial posters, but kind of with, instead of politically charged messages, he says, kind of with banal, very everyday, normal messages, such as something you could say anywhere, like, "Today, there's no water." And he kind of uses this phrase as a political commentary on everyday life in China. It consists of a room chamber whose walls are completely covered from head to toe in Cultural Revolution slangs or slogans and freely mixed with advertising slogans and ancient Chinese poems. On the floor, it actually says in 4 very large characters, translated, "Nobody knows what it means." Combining and kind of juxtaposing meaningless sentences of this mass cultural language, he creates this kind of nonsensical and multi-sense text, which kind of eliminates the illusion of authorship that was presented in the Cultural Revolution pictorial posters presented by the PRC. As a whole, this wave and Wu Shanzhuan kind of reflects this very deep influence of new artistic Chinese waves, especially of the 1985 New Wave art movement. Even if calligraphy is a very ancient and traditional art in its modern use, like Shanzhuan presents in his work and a lot of other really infamous Chinese artists, they use it as an expression of contemporary reality, both in the form of itself and in the context. Ever since 1991, he's kind of settled down. Like I said, I believe he's residing in Germany and Shanghai as of now. And I believe he's still making art. I believe he's moved a little bit past this pictorial era that I'm talking about here, but all of his works are still very politically charged and language-based, which I really appreciate. And I believe he has a lot of exhibits going on in China as of the moment. But if you would like to look him up online or see anything about him, I think you would find it really interesting, as I have if you've enjoyed this video thus far. But his kind of knowledge and his influence on these experimental works with language and use of big character posters kind of made him a precursor to these 2 other really infamous artists after him, of kind of better known works of Gu Wenda and Zhu Bing. I would kind of say this absurdity of Wu's work is a lot more existentialist than Kafkaesque. Kafka in his writings always kind of craved for this healthy lifestyle, but life for him was rather kind of devoid of center and direction and like direct meaning. And Kafka kind of viewed absurdity as a consequence and like the side effect of life. But Wu kind of, in his works, in his Red Humor series, kind of describes absurdity as not so much of a life experience, but rather an ideology. What Wu kind of tries to construct in his works, building off like these very politically charged, like polar opposite slogans is he's kind of what I see it as he's kind of trying to build like this anarchist structure. And it's something that is both anarchist and structural, so does not directly lead to chaos as direct anarchy would. It still does not really produce any comprehensible order or translation as structural, like direct structuralism would. I really view these kind of big pictorial posters and this 80s era of his conceptual art as actually his perspective on life. He kind of sees everything standing between two extremes. And in terms of writing, Wu's politics and these politically charged messages are kind of like a destruction of the structure of social currency that is very heavily weaved into Chinese calligraphy and Chinese language. He views absurdity as kind of like I said, opposed to Kafka, this necessary ideology since it kind of already is unconsciously in the norm of our everyday life. Life is itself absurd, as you know, as I know, as we all know. And absurdity kind of highlights in this work this possibility of reconciliation between, our everyday life and impermanence. And I think his work just kind of perfectly encapsulates that in these big pictorial politically charged messages. But yeah, like I said again, he's still alive. He's residing in Hamburg and Shanghai. I think it's very important to kind of recognize his work, especially kind of with the political climate happening today. I think it's a really important reflection that kind of serves as this reminder that I feel like nowadays careers and success and this idea of studying something important is always so quantitative and it's always so structured. And I think that's kind of making us lose sight for these important studies such as art and the humanities because, the humanities always serves as a reminder that there is this gray area between the two extremes and it serves as an interpretation no matter how absurd the environment or the political climate can get. It studies the in-between of loss of interpretation or magnitude of interpretation. I say this as a UC Berkeley student, a very big tech and STEM oriented school. But yeah, I would say personally researching this artist, it kind of made me think a lot about what I want to do, what I kind of want to devote myself to, what I find an interest in. But I think this artist was really enjoyable. Like I said, it kind of combined all my passions: political economy, anthropology, art history, the absurdity of language. So yeah, I really enjoyed making this video. If you guys would like, if this is the first time visiting this channel, please go check out my other videos. If you like this one, I'm sure you'll like another one. And if you are a returning viewer, thank you so much again. I will be trying to upload a little bit more frequently. I don't know. This semester is probably going to be very hectic. School starts for me on Wednesday, so hopefully it doesn't get too hectic. Thank you to everyone. I hope you enjoyed this mini art history lecture again. And I hope to see you in my next one to give another life update and another art history lecture for my fellow art history community enjoyers. Thank you! Bye!